Hello, John.
Hello.
How are you? Good to
Doing
see you.
well. Good to see you too.
Happy almost Thursday to you.
We're getting there. You're in Los Angeles,
That's right.
okay, and I'm in South Korea. What
Yes.
what kind of weather are we dealing with there?
We had some pretty heavy rain over the past couple of weeks and very cold, probably comparable to a 10-degree Celsius in Korea.
Hmm.
So, given it's normally sunny here, people tend to freak out when we get rain.
Yeah, I
So,
mean it's quite
quite
rare
cold.
that you guys get rain, right?
Yes, we get about 15 days of rain a year on average, maximum.
Is this the time period where you get rain?
Yeah, November
Oh,
through February. So, we should be finalizing. We're at the tail end of that typically. Then we have spring to look forward to.
yes, we do.
Yes.
Brian,
How about yourself? Yes.
so look, I mean, you are teaching our high-level clients right now, and you're doing some amazing work. And I've been able to see your session recordings, and I'm very impressed. So much so that I want you to share really what it is that you're doing with your clients, what kind of progress are you seeing with them, and if you can enlighten us today with that, that would be great.
Sure. I appreciate the time there, Don, and happy to share. I'll give you a little bit more of a background in terms of the client profile, what the challenges are, what we've done, what we're doing, and kind of what's working, what's not. And happy to answer any questions, of course. One client in particular, it's a freight logistic technology company, and they develop a freight solution for the industry, implementing the latest and greatest technology. And there's actually two of my clients. One client's a business slash technology consultant, and his main goal is to translate the value proposition for the company for prospect clients in Europe.
Mhm.
A second is more on the technical side, more on the management side as well from the same company. So I get to have a little bit of a back and forth between the two. The key item that I found before I started we've had about 15 sessions so far. The consultant, his main challenge was primarily to closing on deals and presenting to clients. So they do a PowerPoint presentation.
Mhm.
And initially, when I did the first recording, his main challenge was there's a lot of movement in his head. He's very distracted, and he felt very uncomfortable in a presentation format. So I wanted to help him to understand what that was a result of. Was it mostly his fact that he's not getting enough practice or exposure, or he didn't feel comfortable or confident? And I found out that primarily it was more of an inner belief within himself.
Mm.
So he had the capability. He was a consultant when he spoke in Korean. He was a natural conversationalist. The part of it was the ideas didn't quite come out very clearly. So we had to go down and hone it a little bit more. The second challenge that he had was more about how does he sell his solution to a prospect client. And I think that the clients were somewhat interested, but they weren't quite moving to the next step. So we've tried a slightly different approach, and everything is all encompassing in terms of trying to help his business English, of course. So from a verbal, written perspective, also the mentality as well. So we start from the very beginning. And even though I offered to, how about if we open up an HBR article, something more generic, I'd always start the session saying, what's going on? How was the past week? What's upcoming? And if he had an upcoming presentation, a key meeting, then we would stick with focus and hone in on that in terms of
Mhm.
preparation. So there's a lot of preparation that he's been working on in terms of the PowerPoint. And what I found that has worked was he was more concerned about sounding like a native.
Right.
So accent reduction was his big thing, and he had a lot of body movements, things of that nature. So I try to just to describe to him, make it feel like the presentation is more of like a dialogue, like you're having a discussion one-on-one, and not to try to sound fancy or articulate or native, but really try to shorten and to be able to deliver the key points.
Right.
Right. So you give an example of someone like Jack Ma from Alibaba. He has a very strong, heavy accent, but he's he's the second richest person in China.
Mhm.
And he's well respected, the World Economic Forum, so on and so forth. And that's because he knows how to deliver the point in a very succinct, compelling manner.
Yes, I agree.
So the second thing that he had challenges with was when he was presenting was that he would go into the presentation, he would read off a script almost, and there'd be no engagement with the audience. It was almost like he was a monologue, and I wanted to I wanted to stop him and saying, they want to get to know you, the company, and what's in it for the client, of course, right? So I posed to him a question where I basically asked him, so what about the idea of, instead of trying to sell your product, which is a main point, of course, but how do you sell without selling?
Mm-hmm.
And so the conventional way of selling is, of course, this is how great our company, stats, accolades, awards, benefits, value proposition, all about us, and try to convince the client.
Mm-hmm.
The slightly different modified approach that I use, and we're having the dialogue the whole time, and as he's saying certain things, I just told him in the beginning, whenever I interrupt you, it's not because I'm being disrespectful. It's just I want to catch that moment in time, and I want to restate what I believe you intended to say. And then I would like him to repeat back what it is. And I explain why that would make sense. So he says it, he understands it, he says it again, then that's been pretty much imprinted in his mind, so he can move on to the next. And then I also would try to give him a way to be able to shorten what he's saying. So he says less, but he says more in terms of actual key points. So on his presentation, one, for example, is that he reads through the slide as if he's literally reading off what people are seeing. And I said, well, that's okay, but what happens is when you look at the reports and studies, people in the very beginning of a presentation, the first 30 seconds, they want to believe you, they want to root for you. But
Yes.
if a person keeps on talking, like I am right now, then you want to take a moment to stop and ask a question, engage the audience, ask them questions to get them involved. So it's more of a dialogue. When appropriate, sometimes it's a formal presentation. So going back to the idea in terms of strategy, in terms of presentation, how do you sell without selling? One thing I shared with him, and this is what I found, is that when we can deliver as a coach, not only the business English language, but also the strategy, the methodology, and ideas that they can apply, and you can deliver that in a way that's compelling, then they tend to get more engaged. He was looking a lot forward. He was leaning in. He was a lot more interested, and he
Oh, yeah.
wanted to learn more because this was beyond business English. But I was practicing business English and letting him speak and correcting him along the way. So he's kind of getting the business English plus the strategy, kind of a 2-for-1 overall. So the how do you sell without selling? One example that I try to impart to him is the what they call, quote, the sophisticated salesperson. People don't want to be sold, first off, but they want to see what's in it for them in the back of their mind, right? What they can value, what's in it for them, of course. So basically, I thought maybe one approach would be to give a good, compelling story or a
On
case on. So this is to the prospect client,
Mhm.
and they have their solution, right? The company that's advocating their solution that they develop. Is you give a story, you talk about what you're going to cover, then maybe to introduce a good story, a case study example of an actual client that has had a challenge, they've implemented a solution, and they've experienced XYZ benefit, right? So you give that third party objective, you take them through that case study because the clients may not have heard that before, number one. And number two, it doesn't sound like a sales pitch. And number three is when describing that to try to, the key part here is to quantify the results, to qualify the value proposition. So 30% savings, 20% less time over 3 months, ongoing with 2 out of 9 modules implemented, something of that nature. So they degree the magnitude and saying this is only one module, there's 9 more remaining, there's good upside potential for them, right? So the client's a lot more likely to want to understand, and it's more likely to, it's more believable in that sense because it's an actual story. So that's the first thing. The other way that we try to help them with their sales is they have their own training, their own personal style as well. But I also look to I said, who is a good salesperson or a good speaker that you'd like to emulate after?
Perfect.
Right. So we find out who that is, then we pull them up on YouTube.
Yep.
We watch the YouTube and we look at it from 2 different angles and we play it, we stop, we analyze it, we go back, we practice it, and then have them take notes as well. Right. So we dissect every little part that he's doing. One person was he was a Toastmaster champion. And I shared the link, I played it, and I described what he was doing and why, and how he could apply that to his presentation. And that was one of the things, was trying to keep the audience engaged and not sounding so monotone, changing it up and pausing, letting people digest what it is that they've learned, right? So there's various tips along the way. We go through the whole back and forth. A second thing that I thought was helpful for them, and this is something hopefully might be helpful for the coaches as well, to John Lee, is to have the clients to keep a journal, their own written journal, that
I
they
love
take
it.
notes. Yeah, so that means that's something that they keep electronic, ideally. So if they hear a new word or a new phrase or a new website or an idea, they add to that journal. And that journal is a very simple Word document. But what's interesting is that is going to becomes more valuable later because they add more content. The more content, the more valuable it becomes. And ultimately that becomes kind of their neighbor, their search engine, where they can search for anything that's relative to things that they've learned. The other part of it as well is I told them this, that before we got delved into the details, I told them, how badly do you want to learn business English? I said, you could do it because your company is requiring it, or do you really want to do it because you want to accelerate results in your career and your life? And they said they really want to do that. I said, on a 1 to 10 scale, what would you say? They said, it's a 10.
Yeah.
I said, are you committed to the cause? They said, yes. When I get their conviction and their commitment up front, and I ask them for dedicated, consistent time, not only during the 1 hour, but for them to practice offline and commit to 30 minutes every single day, and they try to learn and add to their journal and come back and saying, this is what I learned, here's a problem that I have. You almost have to go through a point where you have to break out of your comfort zone to continue to learn and to try to develop, right? And then look at your overall approach and look back and saying what's working, what's not, and reevaluate and make adjustments along the way. So that daily journal has been, I think it's been helpful for them because it's specific to what's meaningful for them. Certain words they can't pronounce. One word specifically was the word specific. They
Mm.
would say a different variation of that. And so the other part that I found was helpful is when we have regular dialogue, that when they make a mistake, I correct them right there and then I switch roles and have them teach me.
Oh, wow. I like that one.
So that, that of course, that when they learn, there's various degrees of learning. So passively listening is on a lower level.
Right.
There's about a 20% retention.
Mhm.
When someone's at a position where they hear something, but they're asked to repeat it back to become the teacher, now they're going to be in that high alert mode where they
Mhm.
have to absorb because they know they have to recite back and teach.
Mhm.
So by teaching, you're basically reiterating what you've just learned, and you're using, instead of one senses just by listening, they're now stating, thinking, listening, and they're using multiple senses out of the five senses. So that's kind of one of the accelerated learning techniques that I share with them. So by them teaching me, they reinforce, and then I ask them questions, right? So that's another drill that I like to do. Another example that I do with their presentation is we go through a couple of mock interviews. So I pretend I'm on the client side, literally from the very beginning, from the time they walk in the door, we do a virtual handshake, and I ask them and I go through the dialogue, right? How are you? Nice to meet you, so on and so forth. That small talk all the way to the time when they go through and they have open-ended questions. I play the role of a CEO, then I switch hats and I go with the role of a CTO and then a chief operating officer. So I'll ask different questions based upon the positions. And then I'll kind of gauge their level of understanding of my questions and how they can respond in an appropriate manner, not only appropriate, but in a compelling manner. For example, if I throw off a very difficult question that's technical and they don't understand what the answer is, it's okay to say that's a great. They can basically repeat back the question, and they could indicate that's a great question based on X, Y, and Z because of this context. Why don't I double check on that and get back with you?
Mhm.
Instead of saying, oh, I don't know what that is, right? So how they can handle that kind of impromptu objection is there are different ways that I want to be able to help them. So we go to the next step. They start off the meeting, they go through, and then we go through and I kind of tell them what my analysis is. And we finish that presentation. So another exercise that we do next would be we'll go through and then I'll open up an article, an industry article that's written by a acclaimed author that talks about their industry. And what's interesting is that when we read the article, I not only just want to help them in terms of the speaking aspect, but I have them read out loud. We'll go paragraph or line by line, and they'll read one paragraph, and then I'll share my screen. They'll read it out loud so I can understand the reading comprehension, things of that nature. Then I'll stop and I'll put my screen on blank. Then I ask them to write a two-phrase summary, a 2 words in terms of what's the key point of that author's intended message and how could they apply that to their company. and they would send that to me on the Zoom chat. And then we review that, and I share my screen again. And then I could tell a lot by their reading, their writing ability, number one, their comprehension, number two, their spoken, because I hear them reading. And then I do a second pass in terms of, so what's the message? What do you think about this? Ask them more questions, and then I correct it doing a revision in Microsoft Word, basically doing a kind of an edited, so they
Right.
could see before and after. And then I have them again to repeat that. And through the whole process, if they say something that's incorrect, then I'll try to correct them right there and then. If that word or phrase is incorrect, then they'll take a note, they'll add it to the journal. So they get to practice and reinforce. That's another thing I like to do. And then secondly, I'd also have them go through, and every session we'll probably go through and I'll teach them some new words or new idioms, or I'll send them a list on email of the top 10 business idioms that are commonly used, that they can review it and they can apply it, most importantly. And then at the middle of the session, we'll take a pause and say, okay, how are we doing? Are you learning? Are you engaging? Most of the time, the sessions go by very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
It goes by because when you're going deep dive and you're into it, you don't think about anything else and you're focused. And my whole point is, not only do you want to teach them how to be comfortable and feel confident in their spoken, written business language, but I want to basically get them from the point they're at right now to the point where they want to be, but even beyond. Because if we look beyond where they're trying to get to, we're going to pass and exceed their expectation by default, because we're setting a higher goal, right? So one of the ways I'm planning on doing that is to simply, whatever their target is, say they have about a 6-month goal to get to XYZ, I shorten that to 3 months.
Okay.
Instead of 6, right? So we can accelerate that process. Another thing that I'm in the process of experimenting with right now is how do we deliver much value to teach them what they need to know foundationally, not only during the session, but give them good exercises so that after the session, when they go back to the office, when they go home, the next day when they buy their coffee, that they're implementing and practice and actually going through the process necessary.
Yes.
To continue to practice. And I asked for their commitment 30 minutes a day minimum, whether it's reading, whether it's talking to someone in English at a cafe. I shared a story saying that our family, my mother's more comfortable in Korean. And so I had us do a slight switch where I asked my mother to speak to my siblings in English,
Mm-hmm.
and my siblings to speak to her in Korean, right? Which they're completely, it's a fish out of water experience for them. But by doing that, that gets them, that forces them in a fun way to practice with the intention to want to help that other person.
Mm-hmm.
So they said that they'll try that as well. That's just one example of how they do so. And another thing I'm looking to right now, actually a Caucasian friend of mine, he's fluent in Japanese and Mandarin Chinese. And he said he learned it within about 6 months. And he said one of the key strategies that has helped him to learn to become fluent in spoken, written English or in Japanese and Chinese was essentially learning while he was sleeping.
Learning while sleeping?
Yes. So there's a specific program you can literally play, because you hear about what's the most effective way in terms of how children learn a new language. And their cognitive, when they're about ages 3 to 7, is when they can, whether they learn one language or two, their brain can absorb so much. And the reason why they say, scientists say, is because they're put in a situation where it's a total immersion all around them. People are seeing people, they hear their parents speak in a certain language, they see it all around them, so they absorb so much, and their brain's still forming so much, right? So how do we take that, and how could you apply that to an adult? And one way that coincidentally my friend and how he learned was basically subconsciously hearing a phrase and how it should sound, conversational phrases, right? So he basically listened to 8 hours of Chinese spoken conversational Chinese on a regular basis so that it became second nature and he could be able to repeat that back. So that part I think is an interesting part, because it's not just teaching someone during that 1 hour session, but it's really 8 hours of them subconsciously learning on a regular basis that may help to accelerate that whole process in terms of familiarity. And that alone may not be enough, but it helps to supplement, right? Because it gives them additional exposure.
Yeah, well, it's that immersion that we're referring to, the complete immersion to a language, and
Yes.
surrounding yourself to everything of that target language to level up, essentially. So you've
Yeah.
got writing, you got reading, comprehension, speaking, text. I mean, it's, of course, we're limited to that 1 hour with the student, but from what I'm hearing from you is you're doing a lot of these exercises and outside of the classroom training in order to give our students that immersion that they need to reach their target from, like, let's say 6 months to 3 months, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And
Plus,
yeah,
yeah, plus, meaning that in addition to what you're saying there, I also think of that too. If I wanted to hone and get this person to a point where they're going to be ready and they're going to be solid and confident, that means that business communication skills are going to be a given.
yeah,
But there's a part where some of them, they might feel a little bit more inhibited and not as confident, and they had their body language and everything's kind of shy and timid, inferior, not as confident. So there's certain exercises such as deepening one's voice
mhm.
when they're presenting. One
Oh, yeah.
person was talking very high and very light, very fast. Then I played it back, and then I asked them to listen to it and saying, if you didn't know, if this was not you and you heard someone speaking like this, what kind of impression would you have of that person, right? Whereas if you were to kind of slow it down, focus on the key points, and deepen your voice, speaking from the diaphragm, not from the voice, from the neck, right? People tend to pay, they're more receptive to someone with a deeper, more commanding voice because they believe that they're more confident. And you want to kind of pace yourself as well. Don't feel like you have to read off a script, right? So that type of body language, that type of non-excess movement, you want to just kind of trim that down because it becomes less distracting. A second part as well that I also try to help them with is terms of accelerated learning techniques. So what do I mean by that? One would be they say they have a lot of reading that they have to do. So I said when you're reading novels or reading newspapers in English, most people can read about 120 words a minute, just to regular reading, right? There's certain techniques when you look in the past when you've known certain people in school, in high school, college, who was always the straight A, they're always a valedictorian, so on and so forth. And how do they do that? They're smart kids, or did they learn how to learn? Did they learn how to study? Did they learn how to read? So there's certain techniques such as speed reading that anyone can learn. It takes roughly about 30 minutes. And once you know it, you can adopt it, you practice it, you can essentially read about 3 times faster with about double the comprehension, right? So those type of things by using your fingers to kind of guide and not your right. If you're left brain, use your right hand. If you're right brain, use your left hand. And there's a technique that you can follow. So they tried that and they could practice that as well. And they can consider using that as well, right? And so
Yeah,
those type of things.
that helps because they're reading a lot of articles a week, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That way it's a lot more if they're not only reading faster because the brain processes a lot quicker. If it reads too slow, it tends to tune out a little bit too.
yeah,
So from that cognitive perspective as well, you want to be able to share with them, this is something that you might want to consider that can enhance your learning and accelerate the overall process. And then we do kind of a timeout and say, okay, after several sessions, what do you want to learn? What works well? Do you want to do a YouTube? Do you want to do a mock-up? Do you want me to revise your presentation? Do you want to do more of a conversational? Do you want to read an HBR? And we customize it based on what works for them.
yeah,
Then I do an evaluation on a 1 to 10. How was it before and how is it now? And so what I just shared with you are the ones are probably some of the strategies that they felt was very helpful. And of course, we're always looking for other ways to make improvements, learning from other systems, learning from other sources out there as well on the web, in person, other instructors, kind of the thought leaders as well, and see how we can incorporate that. So it's an ongoing process. We call it Kaizen, right? Kaizen, the process of
yeah.
never-ending improvement.
Yes.
It's,
And I'm hoping that all of the coaches that are tuning in here are taking notes. I'm sure they're going to repeat this because Bryan, you just gave, I couldn't even keep count. I think there are about at least 10 actionable strategies that they can use with their clients because it's very high value, first of all, and it's practical and it's very easy to do if implemented
yes.
the right way. The thing is, our coaches are not only, we're not just English teachers, right, Bryan? We're
Yep.
not English teachers. We're actually business professionals that are helping our clients improve their fluency in the business language. And like you said, you know, it's your example of helping them with the soft sell, you know, how to sell without really selling.
Mm-hmm.
How is that English training, you know?
Yeah.
That's the type of value that I think our clients really enjoy. And, you know, you get them really engaged with it's because the clients there, it's directly impacts their work. And I saw a presentation that I think it was with the technical consultant, I think it was. And you're giving him very high level strategy on how to craft up a PPT, a presentation.
Hmm.
And as soon as as soon as you're giving him that advice or that recommendation, how to change up certain slides and how to reword this here, and his whole demeanor changed. I mean, his eyeballs were, because it's like, wow, that is going to directly impact how I sell. So
Right.
he perked up and he came to you and he said, right,
Yeah.
it's just the thing. I mean, as coaches, we're not um, we're not just teachers. We're their partners, and we want to help them reach their goals in, of course, their English, but their business, their career, their overall life.
Yes.
And the fact is, our clients stay with us, and they love, they reach their goals and targets because that's the type of
Yep.
coach that we have. And
Yep.
you are a prime example, and I'm sure everyone that's watching this can take that away. Like, yeah, wow, can I have him as a coach? You know, there's clients that are going to be watching this too, Bryan. There's people that have not joined us yet that would have heard this and watched this and said, I would like to do exactly what Bryan is doing with his clients.
Sure. And you know what, Don, just share with you as well is I think it is more of is it's a privilege. I really mean this. It's a privilege to be able to help others in that way too. And I see it beyond just a obligation or responsibility. I think of it as more of when I get into the mode, I want to do everything I possibly can to help them as if I was in their situation, plus
Yeah.
more.
Yes.
But delivering exceptional value with that kind of mindset, they realize that, they appreciate that. And if it's going to take someone normally about X number of months, I wouldn't measure the success based upon the amount of time, but more based upon the end result in terms of that person reaching that level of mastery. And if we can accelerate that process, then it may be something that they might want to share with their colleagues and with other people to have others to look into the Donnelly program as well, right?
Right.
It's all about outcomes, bottom line result. And if we can accelerate that process to get them to where they want, the finish line, then that's something I'm more keen to want to get them to that point because I think it is very significant. Everyone has that potential, and most just need a few things that need to be adjusted here and there. But what would be cool one of these days, I hope perhaps for consideration, is if there is, we had a situation where they were looking at doing a major presentation for a major client, and it was a collective team effort. So there would, it'd be good just to help them, which is good, but they wanted to do kind of a role play as a group. So I thought maybe if some of the coaches might have come together and some of the folks on their side as well were to come together, then we can do kind of a mock interview, group session, collaborative feedback, things of that nature, as if we're the prospect clients in a group setting.
Mm.
So they were saying, oh, wow, that'd be very helpful. And he said he would like to talk to some other people. But I didn't agree to that because I wanted to check with you and leadership as well, you and Michael
Mm.
first. But I thought that might be something too, because this is their actual real life situation that they're
Yeah.
dealing with.
Yeah.
So we want to help them basically to make the fine adjustments before they actually go live, right? So they feel very comfortable and confident during the actual presentation. So group presentation and feedback, I'm not sure if that would be a viable option, but I think there's some potential there because what they do is, I'm not sure about the other companies, but they tend to have maybe 3, 4, 5 different meetings, and every meeting leads on to higher level meetings
Mhm.
in higher up positions, and it's not just by one person, and it's kind of in a group format. So if there's an opportunity there, then there will be more of the various coaches that team up together to give collective feedback
I think
as a
we
whole.
can do that. I think we can do that. I think it's going to be highly possible, and I'll bring it up with Michael and we'll discuss it. We may even have to get on a three-way call and discuss the feasibility
Mm,
and happen. I see tremendous value in it, and yeah, we'll circle back on that in soon time.
sure,
All
sure.
right. You know, as you were saying, this notebook idea, I want to show you something. I'll have to save for another day, Bryan.
I see. The notebook is so exclusive and secretive, and
No, I mean, look, it's Bryan. I was born in New York, and I was
yes,
raised in Vancouver. But even as a native speaker, I'm constantly learning. So, for example,
sure.
when I was entering Morgan Stanley, I had no background in finance. I was just I had a degree in finance, but I knew I had to up my game in finance. So what I did was exactly what you told me to do. Well, what you said in this the call. I had a notebook. I had 3 notebooks, by the way. And every commute, every free time that I had, I wrote it down. Meaning, I immersed myself in everything related to finance, whether it was quarterly reports, um, squawk on the street, right?
Mm.
Video, anything related to finance. I was listening, reading, speaking, writing, everything, right? And one of the things that I did was I always just wrote, specifically terms, expressions that I like, that I didn't know and I felt like I could use at my workplace. And so I had 3 notebooks packed.
Mm.
And one of the benefits of doing that is, of course, it creates a good habit, right? And you're constantly learning. But it's like you leave a residue behind when you write, right? It sticks.
Mm-hmm.
It's a difference, right? And so the thing is, my ambition actually got me to do this because my dream was to work on Wall Street.
Mm.
So I was measuring myself to the other folks in New York, and I knew that they spoke better than me. They knew more about me. They knew more about finance than me. So that hunger and ambition drove me to keep like at least 3 notebooks. Like we're not just telling you to do it. Like we've done that, and it helps. So for
Sure.
any clients
That,
watching or any coaches that have clients that are seeking, let's say, an upgrade in their vocabulary or in their expressions, notebooks. It's awesome. Like you just like I keep notebooks here. Anytime, even like when I watch, like I'm re-watching Billions, the show Billions.
billions. Okay.
Have you
I
seen it?
No, I have not, but that sounds interesting though.
You have to. Season 4 is coming out in about 2 weeks, so I'm rerunning it. And so
I see.
it's when you watch something again, you you tend to see things a bit differently. You catch smaller things, and you're able to connect the dots. But what I'm doing is I'm keeping notes on any expressions or any vocabulary that I
Yep.
find. Ooh, let me take that. I can
Yep.
use that. I like that.
Yep.
Particularly because I'm in this business, and I know my clients would appreciate that. So as I'm watching these shows, even as a native speaker, I'm writing this down.
Sure.
It's a habit
Exactly.
I think would be great for our clients to pick up early when they're with us, because it's going to really show dividends in the future, right?
Exactly. And when you're reading something as well, if I hear something from an article, using myself, I hear something on the radio, it's a business article that they're talking about or a commentary. If I hear a certain word or phrase I've never heard about as
Yeah.
well, then that's a good time to look it up and
Oh
say,
yeah.
oh, okay, I understand the context. Then it sticks.
Oh yeah.
And the second thing I want to share with you as well, or the third thing I would share with you as well, that was somewhat interesting in terms of their overall feedback, was they had a challenge where they felt that they were looking to try to speak like a professor and they wanted to sound educated and smart. And I said, well, sometimes when someone tries to speak that much, they add too many words and phrases. They're trying to run when they still are learning how to walk, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
I said, instead of trying to sound nice, to try to, the key thing is to think about what you want to say, take a moment, and then translate that and simplify it in a way that's going to be most receptive to the person listening. How is that person going
Digestible.
to receive? Yeah, most people just think what to say, whatever's coming out, no filter.
Yeah.
They're natural and good at it, that's okay. But really think about it twice and then to simplify it almost on a seventh grade level.
Mm-hmm.
If you can simplify the complex, then everyone can understand no matter how complex that is. So as we're going through the article that was written on a PhD level, he was talking about the industry, and I thought these are all valid points, but basically this much text, the bottom line is just 3 phrases. This is really the key point. And so sometimes they make it bigger than it really needs to be. So I told them, try to simplify the complex and really just focus on the key points in delivering your message.
And that's the exercise that you do when you have them read a passage, and then you'll have them write a summary, correct? In like 3 or 4 sentences, and they'll
If
have
it's
to
a half,
recite it back to you.
that's right. If it's a half page that they've read off, then I would say, how do you shorten this and just pick out the key points without looking at it because they
Right.
can't read off the screen because I blank it out,
Right.
and really to teach me as if I'm a seventh grader.
Uh-huh.
If you teach a seventh grader, how would you translate what the key point is? And then
Right.
beyond that is how can you apply that key point to your current business and your role in your upcoming presentation, occupation, challenges, things of that nature?
Even better. Talk to me as if you're talking to a golden retriever. You know, it's hard. Like it's easy to ramble and keep going, but to deliver a succinct, maybe 2-3 sentence of what you're trying to say and explain, that's very hard. It's very difficult. But I think
Yeah.
that exercise that you do, I don't know if you do it every class, but it's one of the things I think our coaches, if watching, should probably take away and implement with their students, because a lot of our students, as you know, Bryan, they're in a leadership position, right? They're leading teams. And one of the main areas of improvement that I know, because I speak with them, is they want to deliver their points accurately and with impact, right?
Mm.
And they have a lot of trouble with that. And of course, not the root, but having a very weak and limited vocabulary base can result in rambling, can just going on and off. But also, what I found to be a true cause is if they're not confident in what they're delivering to their audience, then there's no stop. They keep going.
Yep.
You know?
Yes.
And I think even the highest level people that we have, GMs, country managers, even CEOs that we have here, because I have listened in and I've taught them, they won't stop unless there's a cue.
Mm.
Or they see that, oh, I think it's time to stop. But as a speaker, you should know, like, you have complete control of what you're trying to say.
Sure.
So I think, Bryan.
And one more thing too, in addition to what you're saying there about that, one thing I found from one of the clients was that he had anonymously, of course, he had a limiting belief. So that's getting down a little bit more deeper. But when I found out, does he speak like this to his family or to those that they're very comfortable with in his native language? And he says no.
Yeah.
That means that there's nothing neurological, there's nothing physical, no inhibitions in that regard, but it might be something up here.
Oh, yeah.
And so he felt almost as if he was always kind of just cringing down and felt very insecure in a very light, quiet, soft voice. And I thought, what is that boiling down to? And it basically came down to a fact that he felt that he was not good enough to be able to present on a client level where they're a lot more fluent in English, and he was at a more of an inferior level. Then I said something that I think kind of gave him some perspective. I said, well, if you compare him to that perspective, but if you look at it this way, they speak one language, they know one culture, you speak one plus more, potentially upcoming two. So maybe even worst case scenario, 1.5, they're only at one. So technically, you actually know more than they do. And secondly, if you're going to be comparing yourself with everyone at an American company and you're comparing as in terms of a person's language with an American company, then yes, you can feel inferior. Perhaps it's understandable. But if you have insight into the Southeast Asian market because you understand the culture and the language, then that sets you apart with everyone else that doesn't have an idea of what it's like outside of the US. Right.
Yes.
So it opens up another gateway of possibilities. Then it puts that person in a much more it puts them more in a confident position because they can offer something that everyone else cannot, which is the idea, the language, the culture, the mentality that other native speakers are not able to even have an idea, right?
Yeah.
So once you realize that ability, then you realize, wow, you know what? I do have that much more to offer. I just need to work on a couple of things here and there. So then it kind of minimizes his limited belief. And that's when you get rid of that, then you enable the other person to open up and more receptive to actually really understanding. And then if we reinforce that with essentially teaching them something, but not only just having them basically to understand and take notes, but reversing that role, that's one of the key parts is having the student teach the teacher.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, same applies to children as well. They say that one technique, when you're using 4 out of 5 senses, essentially, that really demonstrates what they really know or don't know, and it reinforces what they just learned. And so I try to have the other student, my client, have them teach me back the important parts. And that I found is a good way to help to instill and build their confidence and to solidify what they just learned. Teaching.
I
Haven't
think
been
you
faced
nailed the nail. You nailed the coffin on the head. Is that the expression?
it.
What is it?
The last nail in the coffin.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It gets to a point where we had one that had a very urgent meeting and they had urgent client meetings, but they didn't want to reschedule,
Yeah.
even though they could have. They wanted to do it. They wanted to have our session because they know that the session is going to deliver and help them prepare that much more for that meeting. So by delivering value on multiple levels on a massive scale ongoing, not only during that session, but before, during, and after as well. If I come across an article or link, I send that to them. They appreciate that.
Yeah.
He has an upcoming presentation in 4 days. I touch base and saying, how's it going? Do you need help?
Right.
If you need help, we'll do a quick ad hoc session, whatever's needed. Basically, do whatever it takes to help them and exceed their expectations ongoing. And by having that kind of mentality, that I just find that they seem to be very helpful and very appreciative. And they want to, yeah, they do want to stay a little bit beyond with the sessions, but sometimes they have to end it because of our time and all. But it's
Very,
good. I look forward to future sessions and
yeah.
I'm happy to help others too along the way.
And you are this call, I'm sure, is providing a lot of value. I mean, again, just to piggyback on that, you're creating buy-in from the clients early on. And as a skill of a coach, the faster you get buy-in with your clients, I guess the faster you can get your client onto your plan, that accelerated learning plan, and help them reach targets. That will be for another topic. I think we can go on and on, Bryan. There's so many things to say, but I'm having a series of these calls, so yours will be posted to our group page. All the coaches will be able to see.
Oh, I see.
And there'll be a continuation. We'll have other coaches share their lesson plans and their strategies and what they are doing with their clients. So that's the initiative here, Bryan. So
okay, great.
I am very thankful for you taking the time and sharing these gems. I mean, that's just awesome. I think our coaches and clients and anyone who watches this is going to gain a lot of value. And your clients are very lucky. They're very lucky to have you. And I'm very appreciative of your endless service to our clients. And Bryan, if you're ever in Korea, you know where to find me.
Okay? Sure, I'll be sure to reach out. And just to comment as well, I've seen all the other interviews you have with instructors and very high quality caliber instructors.
Oh yes.
So it's very fortunate. I'm happy to be part of a great team and happy to serve in meaningful ways any which way that I can. And everything that I shared with you today was just in my humble opinion, of course, and always trying to learn more, to add more value to others. So appreciate it. Thanks for your time as well, and nice to see you.
Likewise.
Please go well.
And if there's anything you need, you let me know. But thank you so much today.
Will do. Thanks so much. Good to see you, Don.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye now.